back to another episode of Lost in the Farmer's Market Garden Shorts, where today we're talking about this lovely perennial here. This is a new addition to the gardens, replacing an old one that perished when I tried to transplant it like 2 years ago. It's harder to find in the southeast than I would care to admit, but enough dilly-dallying around. This plant is Origanum majorana, also known as Marjoram. Yeah, that one. It's in the Lamiaceae family, because what isn't these days, almost. And the word majorana indirectly derives from Latin for major. Very indirectly. So, it is native to the Mediterranean, Turkey, West Asia, the Arabian Peninsula, and the Levant. Interesting. It is considered a tender perennial in zones 7 through 9, but it can be hardy up to zone 5. Which is surprising, but okay. Now, I want to talk about that for just a moment here. They say tender perennial, but the interesting thing is that the original specimen was a hardy perennial for years in one spot, though because of the dry soil and the difficulty getting irrigation to that location, it never got very large. This one is going to be grown in a pot in the hopes that I can get better results. However, it was an evergreen perennial, so there's that. So maybe zone 8A is the trick? I don't know. Anyway, its soil pH preference is 4.9 to 8.7, and it prefers fast-draining fertile soil, but its soil pH range is amazing. 4.9? Holy crap, that's like acid land. But that's how the Marjoram do. Its exposure is full sun, which means 6 plus hours. However, it should get some partial shade in the southeast. That means morning sun, afternoon, partial shade or shade. Mostly so its roots don't cook off because it has a pretty shallow root system, unfortunately, and that is its downfall in the hot, dry sandhills of North Carolina. Its height can be 1 to 2 feet, and its width can be 12 to 18 inches, though it can spread because it is a mint, and any section of this stem here that touches the earth can root. So technically, individual plant spreads are 12 to 18, but there's no telling how many stems will hit the ground and, well, get the going while the gods get. So anyway, in terms of cultural care, and I'm going to point this out, you're supposed to snip the flowers off, and I haven't done it because I wanted to show them off for this video. You don't want flowers because it changes the flavor of the foliage, and you want it to put its energy into foliage, not flowers and seeds. So after this video is over, yes, I'm going to snip those off. Now, this plant is also known as Sweet Marjoram, Knotted Marjoram, Pot Marjoram, and, believe it or not, Dittany of Crete is actually a type of marjoram. So there's that. It was known to the ancient Greeks and Romans as a sign of happiness, and honestly, I could dig that. Interesting, but in the United States, it's really weird. We did not widely use it in the USA until after World War II. I mean, talk about being behind the ball. That's kind of sad. But then again, we did have a cooking renaissance in like the 50s and 60s and 70s, so, you know, there it is. Now, its pests include aphids, cutworms, and spider mites, though in the field I didn't see it get any of these problems. And, interestingly, before hops were used to make beer, Marjoram, and Oregano flavored ales instead. Okay, I wonder what those tasted like. I'm really curious to know. Now, here's a fact you didn't know. Marjoram itself is nutritious. It has high levels of iron, it has vitamin C and A, and it has calcium. So it's good for you. Huh, that's one heck of an herb. Now, I do have to talk about a little bit of industry dishonesty for a moment. It is common that you'll see Origanum vulgare, or common basic oregano, mislabeled as marjoram for some stupid reason. I don't know why people do this, but it is patently dishonest. It is painfully dishonest. And so, you have to be careful what you're buying. Not everything is marjoram. And then there's the cross between oregano and marjoram, but and sometimes that's called Italian oregano or something marjoram. And unfortunately, that variety loses a lot of the sweet flavor that marjoram is known for, henceforth sweet marjoram. So it's not quite the same, but it is more cold tolerant. So there is a subtle trade-off there. And then there's the whole issue of the fact that it is a mint, and you have to consider that if it is, interestingly, Origanum, so they are closely related, they can crossbreed, so there is a possibility that having two of these near each other, there may be hybrids. So keep that in mind as well. I would keep the marjoram and the oregano far apart so that they can't cross, because oregano, as seen in the test gardens, produces a lot of flowers, and the pollinators are just going whole ham out there right now. So, beyond that, I'm just going to point out why it's hard to get marjoram in the southeast. Apparently, not a lot of garden centers stock it, and I literally had to travel 60 miles out of town to get one. And it wasn't even what I was looking for. I just happened to see it, and I was like, ooh, shiny! You know the impulse. And that's actually, consequently, I was there, ironically, for scented geraniums. That's what I was actually there for, and I kind of succeeded. But it's not sold, the real deal is not sold often in the South because it doesn't, people don't have as much success with it as they should, or they think they should. And so, of course, after a few seasons of people killing it, they just stop buying it, and then suddenly the providers stop providing it, and you get the picture. However, you can grow it, you just have to give it a little more shade and make sure its moisture levels are maintained, because its roots, again, don't go very deep. In fact, this pot was picked because it's a fluted pot, it forces the roots to condense, gives them multiple opportunities to catch whatever water and nutrient are going before it comes out the bottom. Bowl planters would be better for this, but that's just an afterthought. Once I pot things up, I rarely change it unless repotting is absolutely required. Now, this specimen is doing really well, but you can actually look very carefully and see where it was trimmed for cuttings early on. So this was a much more mature specimen, and that's actually kind of why I picked it. So, that's all I have for you on marjoram. If you have any questions or comments about marjoram, please put them in the comments section. Your growing tips would be appreciated. I've grown it for a while, so I have a pretty good idea what it does, but if you're further south and you have additional tips, I'd love to hear it. Or any other funky garden ideas you got. If you have any suggestions for plants I need to cover or should cover, go ahead and put them in the comments section. In addition to that, if you like this video, hit like. If you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps the channel. In the video description, if you go down to the bottom, you'll see a link to the Forage Foods blog. And you'll find out about wild plants that you can eat, including, and I do have, like pokeweed, for instance. I have warnings about plants you shouldn't eat and for what reasons, and how to eat wild plants that you wouldn't normally eat, and how to prepare them. So, with that said, thank you for watching, and keep them growing, folks.